All right, welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and get started with tonight's webinar, which is on deer population goal setting. Thank you very much for all being here. My name is Adam Kokotovich. I work in the DNR's Division of Fish and Wildlife in the Policy and Planning Program, and I'm here tonight to help facilitate this meeting. So to start off, I'd like to hand it over to Gretchen Miller, who's going to provide some brief welcoming remarks. Gretchen is the Central Region Wildlife Manager. Gretchen.
Thank you, Adam. Can everybody hear me okay? Hopefully we got a thumbs up there. All right. Hey, welcome everybody. Thanks for taking the time tonight to engage on a topic that's important to all of us, whitetail deer population goal setting. As Adam said, my name is Gretchen Miller. I'm the Central Region Wildlife Manager, and I use she, her pronouns. I supervise the amazing and intelligent staff on the ground in the deer permit areas we're going to be discussing today. They and other DNR staff present will provide information and answers to questions you guys may have on these multi-year goals. It's great to see that you're joining us, and technology doesn't always make things easier, it just makes it more possible. So glad you're joining. DNR's desire to engage with all of you guys around this important subject continues, and we're committed to having a conversation like these today as well as going forward. So just wanted to make sure that tonight's discussion is open, you feel comfortable sharing, and if you feel free to do so. Tell us your name and where you live in the community. That might be helpful for all of us since this is a virtual attendance. The rest of us will listen patiently and respect each other's points of view and see where we can seek out understanding on everything that's going to be shared with us today. So thank you in advance for participating in your time here today. That's all I got, Adam.
Great. Thank you very much, Gretchen. And so, yeah, to reiterate those goals for tonight, they are to provide an overview of the deer population goal setting process and to share the draft population goals for the deer permit areas being addressed this year. Also, to answer your questions and hear your feedback on the goal setting process and those draft population goals. So I also want to take a brief moment to introduce the additional DNR staff that we have with us tonight. We have a variety of local and statewide staff here in attendance. We're here to listen to and help answer your questions and comments. So, okay. Okay, so for area staff for goal block 4, we have Christine Reese, Tim coming from Brainerd area, or who is the Brainerd area wildlife supervisor. We have Tim Marion out of Cambridge, Steve Peepgrass from the Mille Lacs WMA. We have Chris Balzer from out of Cloquet, Russ Reese out of Aitkin, Bo Liddell out of Little Falls, along with Jeremy Maslowski, also out of Little Falls. For the goal block number 5, for the Sandplain and Big Woods goal block, we're joined tonight by Jim Labar out of the Carlos Avery WMA, Bob Fashionbauer out of Rosemont, Tim Ferris also out of Rosemont, Fred Bankston out of Sauk Rapids, Scott Noland out of Forest Lake, and Janine Vorland out of Owatonna. So we're also joined this evening by some regional and program staff, including Lindsay Chartel, who's the Northeast Regional Wildlife Manager, Leslie McAninley, the Wildlife Populations and Regulations Manager, and Barb Keller, the Big Game Program Leader. All right. So just to cover a few logistics for tonight's meeting, you will see that you are muted and that this session is being recorded. It's being recorded so that we can share it with others on our website after this meeting is complete. And you're muted, and we will unmute you if you have a question that you'd like to ask and such. The agenda for tonight, So as we pointed to before, we're going to have a presentation on the deer population goal setting process and the draft goals, and then we'll open it up to questions and comments from you all. To provide your questions and comments, there are two ways to do so. You can type your questions into the Q&A panel, or you can raise your hand to go into detail on those. So using the Q&A function, you can submit a question at any time during this evening, during the presentation or afterwards. To do so, you want to find the Q&A icon. Given all the updates that these software platforms have, it's always kind of changing what it looks like. So depending on how you're connecting tonight, it's going to look like one of those things on the right. Once you click it, a panel will open. You can type in your question and you can select sending it to all panelists. So all of the DNR staff joining tonight can see it. You can type your question and hit send. For raising your hand, you want to find the hand icon. If you're joining on a phone, you might need to click advanced options actually to find it. Actually, to find it or the Q&A function. So once we get done with the presentation and have gone through some of the questions submitted through the Q&A function, we will ask for any additional questions and you can raise your hand. We will unmute you at that point in time and you can share your question or comment. To make sure that everyone has an opportunity to share this evening, we just ask that you be respectful of the time that you're taking. Also want to mention that this is only the first of a variety of feedback opportunities concerning these draft goals for this year. We have an open period now for the next few weeks to provide that feedback, and there's a variety of different forms it can take. So in addition to taking part in this webinar tonight, you can take an online questionnaire that we've created to gain your feedback on these draft goals. There's a link to it here. You can also find it through the main deer management website at the DNR. This is the kind of ideal way for you to provide feedback on the draft goals. It goes through DPA by DPA, and you can really provide DPA specific detailed feedback concerning your support or opposition to the draft goal and your reasons why. So we really encourage you to take this online questionnaire. It's open now. You can take it after the webinar tonight. And we encourage you to share the link with others who may be interested in providing this type of feedback. In addition to that online questionnaire, there are 2 in-person meetings coming up. One for each of the goal blocks that we're looking at this year. So a week from today on January 30th, we'll be meeting in Pine City at the Pine Community and Technical College for a meeting on the DPAs related to Goal Block 4. The next day, January 31st, Tuesday, we'll be meeting down in Rosemont at the Dakota County Technical College and discussing in detail the DPAs specific to Goal Block 5. We'll be covering both goal blocks tonight, as this is the one webinar that we're putting on for both goal blocks. Finally, you can also email us at deergoalsettingsurvey.dnr@state.mn.us if you'd like to provide feedback on the goal setting process or the draft goals that way. If you'd like to learn more about this, you can visit either of those websites. They end up at the same place, the main deer management webpage at the DNR website. And you can find out more about the goal setting process there and ways to provide feedback on this year's draft goals. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And I'm going to hand it over to Todd Froberg, who is let me see, make sure I get it correct. He is the Big Game Program Coordinator here at the DNR, and he's going to be providing the presentation that provides an overview of the goal setting process and of the draft goals for this year. So Todd, feel free to take it away.
Sorry, it always takes my other controls away when I go to my share my screen. So I'm going to restart that, and we'll see if I'm showing correctly. Is that working, Adam?
You
Does it
see your
show?
welcome to our webinar slide. Can you advance it to
Okay.
your presentation?
Is that working now?
That is
Correct.
working wonderful.
Correct mode.
You're good.
Okay. Perfect. Well, I am Todd Froberg, as Adam said, the Big Game Program Coordinator. I help oversee and set rules and regulations for deer, elk, and moose management on a statewide basis. And tonight we will talk about our final year of goal setting for the East Central Uplands and Sand Plain Big Woods goal blocks. And so I guess first off, I'd like to thank everybody for attending tonight. These are pretty important goals on a 10-year basis. And before I get started, I'll apologize ahead of time. As mentioned before, technology can be a blessing and a curse. So I'm doing this from home. So if there's toddlers screaming or Labradors barking in the background, I will try to chug through that and just ignore that. But we'll see if they follow the rules and don't interrupt. So moving forward, first off, what are population goals? As I mentioned, they guide deer management for the next 10 years. And just in general, they're ecologically and socially acceptable population goals that reflect the DNR missions based on those ecological and social management objectives. And they're articulated as the desired direction of magnitude for the change over the next few years. So an increase, decrease, or stay the same. And depending on that desired direction, can impact what the management designations are for an annual basis. In the map on the right, so as I said, this is the last year of our goal setting for these this 4-year process. So the blue areas were our first year, the purple areas were in the second year, the previous year, the green areas, and of course this year now on the yellow areas. And there are 2 areas of the state, the Red Lake Reservation and then 701, the management zone, that are do not have population goals or are not under our authority. So the goal setting process in general, first off, I guess kicking off is a hunter and landowner surveys, attitude surveys, and collecting and gathering some other background information. And the examples of that other background information, would be on an annual basis is the public input process, or any type of public input that we gain from our stakeholders or anybody who's calling, hunters, landowners. And then we also work with federal and tribal partners to gain input, and ultimately this guides what these draft goals are. And the next step down the public input is the current process that we are at. So in addition to those attitude surveys is this public input process. In this is part of this tonight, the webinar, and then 2 other public in-person meetings, as Adam mentioned, one in Pine City and one in Rosemount, one for each block. And then of course we have opportunities through the DNR website and email to provide input, or calling and talking to your area manager. So once we get the overall general arching public input, a lot of thought is put into this, and the data is analyzed, and these goals are revised from the draft goals to, or potentially revise to what we receive from public input. And then the final step is DNR finalizes these recommendations, and those recommendations are of course shared with the public. And as I mentioned earlier, these harvest or the goals that are set impacts harvest management strategies and how we will be setting harvest, and those will come out in 2023, or would impact the 2023 hunting season. So just quickly, there's been some changes to the process since 2014. So we sent out a public input survey in 2019. So we did this a little bit differently. The last time the goals were set was in 2014. So partly due to, well, just I guess in general, wanting to revise and make the process better, maybe poor input. We wanted to revise and switch the way we were doing this. And previously we had been doing this through advisory teams. And those public surveys went out to help determine and gather information on how we want to move forward with the goal setting process. And so the switch now to how we were doing it previously with the advisory teams, and now we're doing it through those top ranked options that are shown here: online questionnaires, written questionnaires, and then general public input meetings. So these revisions really help gain support, foster communication and transparency, and ultimately allow for more input in general for the goal setting process. All right, so deer population management is a balancing act. Simply put, there's two types of balancing that we need to achieve. So those habitat or ecological carrying capacity versus the social carrying capacity. So sometimes it's maybe fairly easy to see how much the habitat can support, but may not be as easy to determine what the public will support. We have a wide array of stakeholders with a wide array of input or a wide array of input that guides deer management. And with those come potential benefits and also potential detrimental impacts. And some of those potential benefits, sorry, I'm advancing the wrong slides. I'm caught up. So some of those potential benefits, I'm assuming we always have a large contingent of hunters that are very interested in this. So that's probably the case again tonight. So obviously deer hunting is a huge tradition in Minnesota. White-tailed deer are the most popular hunted game in North America in general, and that holds true in Minnesota. It's a large portion of our funding model. That people love viewing deer, taking pictures of deer. They're just a pretty fun species to, in general, observe and view, especially if you're experiencing those rutting activities or anything like that. It can be pretty awesome. And as I mentioned, a little bit of the economic benefits, especially in some of those rural areas, it's a huge economic boon. And if some of you are like my family, it's a source of healthy protein and good protein and relatively cheap protein. And I make all kinds of stuff, sausage and brats and hot dogs. And so it's very important to me and very important to a lot of people. And then there's also ecosystem benefits. Some of that's related to the potential drivers in those funding models that impacts a lot of species beyond just deer. So, but with that, there comes potential detrimental impacts. And some of those are agricultural damages, whether that's traditional crops of row crop or stored forage. If we are having severe winters, stored forage becomes a really easy food source for deer, or can be an easy food source for deer, and can impact people's livelihoods. And forest damage, if there's a lot of deer, overabundance of deer, there can be some detrimental impacts to native vegetation or native regrowth. And then deer vehicle collisions. Of course, if there's more deer on the ground, there's a potential for more vehicle collisions, public health concerns, impacts to other wildlife. I mentioned a little bit of that, some of the detrimental impacts to forest health, native species, and disease concerns. And one of the main diseases that we are worried about, I guess, in whitetail deer in general in North America, but also here in Minnesota, is CWD. I'm not going to go super deep into this. I'll just give a brief overview because I could talk for hour or longer on CWD, and we'll try to stay on topic. But CWD is a neurodegenerative disease with no treatment or vaccine. It's 100% fatal. And there's a couple different modes of transmission, but spread through bodily fluids within deer, saliva, urine, feces, and prions persist in the environment and remain infectious for slightly undetermined length of time. Best science is kind of says 15 to 20 years, potentially longer. And the incubation period in the disease in wild deer is 1.5 to 3 years until they exhibit clinical signs. So this map shows, I guess, the distribution of samples and CWD on the landscape. It kind of gives a picture of our statewide surveillance and management areas of CWD. And on the right, it shows, I guess, the management actions, which are sometimes not incredibly popular because when dealing with wildlife diseases, a lot of times you are reducing densities or taking actions that may be a little bit controversial or not desired by all members of the public. Some of those are increased bag limit, increased pressure on antlered bucks, expanded hunting opportunities, removing APRs, deer feeding and attractant bans, and then targeted culling in localized areas near those positive detections of known disease. So with that, within these two goal blocks, goal block 4 and goal block 5, there are a few different areas where we have CWD management and also CWD surveillance areas. This one in particular is showing DPAs 157, 159, and 225. This goal block, or these DPAs, sorry, this portion of the goal block, these DPAs, have undergone 3 years of CWD surveillance without a positive detection. You can see that little star was a positive cervid facility, which was the reason why we conducted CWD surveillance in these DPAs. Thankfully, it has gone with those 3 years without another detection. So we will be discussing what we will be doing with CWD in this DPA moving forward. Per our CWD surveillance, or per our CWD management plan, we will be looking at getting rid of the surveillance in that area. But those discussions, I guess, will be continuing and have not been made yet, but we are hopefully moving towards that. All right. So this is DPA 604, and again, this shows the sample distribution within the DPA for this year. Again, very good sample distribution within this DPA. It gives us a lot of great information. Hunters have been fantastic in DPA 604, provided a ton of samples. And unfortunately, we found another CWD positive deer at the end of the hunting season this year. So again, it resets the clock for surveillance for another 3 years. And it's at 3 years because of the length of the incubation period, as I mentioned before, for the disease. So that gives us a window of time to detect a disease if it's present within the wild deer. And then goal block 5, we have another area of persisting infection. This is DPA 605, just South Metro. In the main areas of, I guess, focus here, or the main areas of disease detection are right in the middle of the DPA, around the Chub Lake, WMA, and then there's been a few sporadic detections just north here in the Vermilion Highlands, and then one to the far west of the DPA, but most of known disease detections have been in that Chub Lake area, so still fairly consistent within the middle of that DPA, but a persisting infection nonetheless. All right, so back to the goal setting process, or deer management in general. So we can think of I guess, deer management as a kind of a slow ship, or turning a ship versus turning a kayak. Populations don't turn on a dime. There's some things that can impact, deer populations on a localized basis, or on a very sharply. Things like severe winters, or maybe EHD or HD. Hemorrhagic disease can impact deer populations very locally, and have major impacts, and maybe reduce the population on a local basis pretty drastically. Those are the things we don't want to do. We don't want to drastically overshoot or undershoot populations of deer. So those population goals, we're not trying to overshoot them. These changes are pretty blunt, so we don't have a sharp instrument. So we're going slow and steady versus fast and furious. All right, so we have kind of 3 main tools we manage deer populations. And the first one is harvest in general is probably the most impactful, especially on a short-term basis. It can be very effective, and can be very speedy. And how we do this is by offering or limiting antlerless tags. You don't have to be a biologist to know that the does are the ones contributing to the population. So limiting or creating opportunity to harvest does impacts the population. And it, for the most part, is most effective. It can be pretty quick, and is the least difficult. Habitat management, on the other hand, is very effective and can be very effective for a long-term purpose, and depending on the type of habitat management, whether we are doing, maybe some forest regeneration takes longer, versus if you're doing a prescribed burn or something, maybe you're seeing some potential impacts very quickly. But in all likelihood, the speed of change is pretty slow with habitat management, and difficulty can be it's pretty costly to do big time habitat management. And we have limitations as a state agency, doing most of our habitat management on public lands versus private. Some of these DPAs are heavily private land areas and not public land. So it's limited on how we can make impacts on habitat management. And then predator management is kind of a mixed bag. And depending on the predator in general, for some of these DPAs, and especially in Gold Block 4, the northern portion of the DPA, there's probably a concern about wolves. And I guess before we get too far into this, we recently released our wolf management plan, which is complete and objects outlines and guidance on wolf management, and then further identifies criteria where wolf hunting season could be held. But also equally important to note is that wolves are currently listed on the ESA and under federal management, so not state management. But further delving into the predator piece, the effectiveness can kind of be varied. If we're going to talk about coyotes, maybe in some of these DPAs, really you have to be really hard on coyotes during the fawning season, and it has to be super intensive and year after year. Research has shown if you kind of hit them hard and it's sporadic, it really doesn't do a whole lot. But if you hit them right during the fawning season, it can be effective, but it has to be super intensive and again on an annual basis. And it has to be very timed to time out that fawning season. They're a very transient species, so they're moving back and forth a lot, and new coyotes are moving in. So it can be very difficult and labor and time intensive. Okay, well, let's jump into the goal blocks. We'll just give a brief overview of how these goal blocks are comprised. So block 4, I've talked a little bit about this, but the northern portions of the DPA, as I said, have more wolves and bears and are, more of the northern forested zones, and include some of the transition zone DPAs, and have compared to block 5, have a little bit higher woody cover, and fairly low annual row crops, and fairly low developed areas. In block 5, the Sand Plain Big Woods gold block, a little bit less woody cover, and some more annual row crop and grassland and wetland cover type. And as you can see from the blank white area in the middle of this goal block, that is DPA 701, that is the metro zone. So these areas surrounding the metro zone, as you can imagine, being part of the metropolitan area, are holding fairly good numbers of deer because they're creating some refugia surrounding those areas that are have, I guess, some limited deer hunting opportunities, or some very small parcels where it's difficult to impact some of those deer populations in those areas. And just a quick overview of harvest for goal block 4. So in this graph, or in this bar chart here, these are all combined DPAs within goal block 4 on a yearly basis. So as you can see, there's a dip in the middle, and likely an impact of the severe winters in 2013 to 2014. But overall, it's the trend line that you can see there is trending up. And this DPA is or this goal block is interesting because there's a slight variance in the northern DPAs that are maybe trending at a very slow increase or are stable or maybe even slightly declining deer population versus that transition zone where there's likely a pretty healthy deer population. And as you can see, the average harvest per square mile in this goal block is 4.3. And then goal block 5, which is the more southern goal block. The harvest per square mile, the average is 3.4. And again, you can see that dip in the middle. In this area, you wouldn't necessarily tend to think that there'd be as a heavy impact of those severe winters. But it's likely a result of that. And in this DPA, we didn't hit on, I guess, the predators as much, but there's likely not much wolf predation in these DPAs. There's probably a few here and there, but for the most part, coyotes are the biggest predator in this goal block. All right, I'm jumping back and forth to the blocks. So just to be sure we know what block we're talking about, we're back to block 4. And this just has us separated between antlered buck harvest and antlerless harvest. So legal antlered buck harvest. And then below is the harvest designations. So 155, 156, 159, 172, and 183 with their 1 deer limit. And that was a combination of either sex limits, and 172 was the exception with a antlerless deer lottery. So for those with obviously the either sex, meaning it's 1 deer limit but only 1 buck, and then the antlerless or the antlerless lottery, those drawing antlerless tags could harvest an antlerless deer. And this tells a little bit of a story. There's a larger proportion of antlered bucks taken, maybe to some of the other DPAs within this harvest block. And that's because there's limited opportunity to take antlerless deer due to the desired direction of which the population is wanting to go. In these other DPAs, 152, 157, 248, and 249 were 2 deer limits. So again, only 1 buck, but 2 deer total. And then the other DPAs were a combination of 3 deer limit with an early antlerless season. So creating quite a bit of opportunity to harvest antlerless deer. And I guess you can see from this that 152 is quite a bit lower than the other one. And that's just because it's that is Mille Lacs WMA. So a very relatively small DPA compared to the other, and even 248 is a pretty small DPA in general. So we'll jump to harvest in block 5. And again, 235 and 224. Both pretty small DPAs, with being Mille Lacs WMA and Sherburne National Wildlife Refuge. And the only one, I guess, with the 1 deer limit, either sex, was 235 Carlos Avery WMA. Those in 224, 285, and 338 were 2 deer limits. And then the rest, with the exception of 605 due to a CWD management zone, were a 3 deer limit. In a combination of early antlerless season and just 3 deer limit in general. So this somewhat in comparison to the last one I showed, but it's probably more representative of harvest in these DPAs. And potentially about deer opportunity within these DPAs. That last one was a total harvest in general. This is harvest per square mile. The statewide average is 2.5. So most of these DPAs are performing above the statewide average. And again, in block 5, and that state average being 2.5. Again, a majority of these are performing over the statewide average. Sorry, I was switching that on mine, but not on the one I'm sharing. So I will let you digest that for a second. Okay, so in this, back to block 4, I have added deer density estimates with this. So these estimates are derived from a harvest-based population model. And as you can see with the error bars, there's some error associated with it. I would encourage people not to fixate on what the deer density estimate is or the error bars associated with that. It is a model, and these are estimates. Some of these DPAs perform better than others. Some are more true to others. Some are higher. Some are lower. The thing to focus on is harvest trends and what the model does well, and that is detect harvest trends. So that's how these goals, when they're set, are monitored through those harvest trends. The model stays constant, so the harvest trends are the most important thing. And again, on not fixating on those deer density estimates or the error, rather focusing on, in general, where do you think the population is? Would you like to see an increase? Would you like to see a decrease? Would you like to stay the same? And that really is the most important part, because as I mentioned, the modeling density estimates don't drive harvest management designations, but rather other inputs, including harvest trends, public input, area manager observations, and other things that go into annual harvest designations. And again, in block 5, these are the harvest per square mile and those deer density estimates. Okay. And in this one, I have added, so harvest per square mile, the deer density, and those hunter densities. So the statewide average of hunter densities per square mile is 5.7. And hunter density plays a very important role in our annual decision-making process. You really have to be cognizant of what those management designations are in comparison to the hunter densities, because we don't want to apply the same management designation to two DPAs if they have very different hunter densities that could be very impactful of the outcome based on hunter opportunity or those management designations. And something, I guess, is just in general interest within both block 4 and block 5. Those hunter densities tend to be a little bit higher in those public hunting areas. So one block, or DPA 152, has a little bit higher one. In block 5, you can definitely see that within those public DPAs, 224 and 235, Sherburne National Wildlife Refuge and Carlos Avery. And in this, further telling the story with these, and it pretty much, you know, so this is Lambda, which is a fancy way of saying our modeled population growth. So how fast the population is growing, and it's you know, correlates pretty well with how the deer density is doing in most cases, and you know how the population is performing. And again, these are estimates, so they're likely not perfect. There's a bit of error associated with it, but in general, the DPAs that we are seeing, you know, higher deer densities or higher deer populations, the model is indicating that the population is growing. And in most of these, or all of these in block 4, the model is showing a population increase, although with DPA 156, 159, and 183, and I guess even 172, you know, that's just a 1% increase or a 3% increase. So I would say that's pretty, you know, pretty stable, pretty slow. So on a you know, an annual variance or basis, it could, you know, be pretty stable or slightly increasing, slightly decreasing. So again, don't fixate on just exactly what that says, but it's just an indicating trend. And these are those population growth estimates for goal block 5. And as you can see, I guess in DPA 338 and 605, and previously on goal block 4, which I did not mention, there were some that are not indicating population growth, and that's due to boundary changes. So the model performs best, and it takes a little bit of time to get those to recalibrate itself and get those harvest and other estimates kind of speed. So taking 5 years to get that before that, I guess the population is modeled. And some of that is, I guess, due to being a CWD management zone. So those DPA boundaries have changed, or changing DPA boundaries in general. Okay, we'll jump forward. As I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, one of the starting points, the kickoff point to goal setting was a public input period. So the hunters and landowners attitude surveys are part of that kickoff process. And these are the results of that. This is for the block 4. DPA 152 is Mille Lacs WMA, so there's no landowner data associated with that, but the blue are the desired percent increase change in the population. So those are hunters, and then the green is landowner. And something important to, I guess, discuss or mention with the landowner data is a lot of landowners are also hunters. So there are hunters within the landowners. And then this same data for block 5. Again, hunters are in the blue and landowners are in the green in most of these. The hunters are wanting to see a larger increase than the landowners are. And again, for 224 and 235, public land held, so no landowner data. And in general, for both of these blocks, we had a pretty good response rate. Hunters were average 42%, and the landowner response rate averaged between the two DPAs of 48 and 52% response rate, which is pretty good. Most public surveys, you get around a 30 to 35% response rate. And then just a brief overview of, or diving more farther into the public attitude surveys and the public input. So in general, most hunters thought that deer populations have declined over the last 5 years in Block 4. And most hunters within 100 DPAs and 604 thought the deer populations were too low. And then most hunters within the 200 DPAs thought that they were about right. So the block average was about 45%. And as I kind of alluded to earlier in the presentation, there's a little bit of a split within the 100 DPAs on the more northern forest versus the 200 DPAs in the transition zone. But this is consistent with both blocks. Hunters rank the top 3 most important factors when considering deer or setting deer goals. The deer hunting tradition, deer mortality in a severe winter, and then potential health risks to the deer herd. And then one of the survey questions, which is just of interest, 85% of hunters would shoot an antlerless deer within Block 4 if given the opportunity. And switching over to Block 5, hunters were pretty split on their perceptions of the deer population in the last 5 years. 38% thought less, 25% thought more, and 35% thought it was the same. But different from Block 4, Block 5, most hunters thought deer populations were about right. So a large majority, 54%. And then hunters ranked, again, those same rankings, deer hunting tradition, deer mortality in severe winter, and potential health risks to the deer herd. And pretty on par with the amount that would shoot an antlerless deer, so 86% versus the Block 4 of 85. And switching over to the landowner input in Block 4, landowners were pretty split on the perception of deer trends in the last 5 years. 37% thought fewer, 35% thought it was the same, and 27% thought more. A majority, 54% of landowners thought the deer populations were about right. And then some of the questions that landowners were asked and rankings when considering these factors for setting deer goals, the potential health risks to the deer herd, deer mortality in a severe winter, public health, and deer hunting tradition and heritage. So some, consistencies with the hunters. And as I said, a lot of the landowners are probably also hunters as well. But there's just a little bit of slight differences. And then teasing out some of this data within the survey, hunters were asked, divided by strata, and then asked, what types of land they had, teasing out some of the ag or forested, and then residential land uses. So 9% reported ag damage, 30% reported forest damage, and 18% reported residential land damage. And then the landowner data for Block 5, again, split on perception of deer trends. 29% thought fewer, 41% the same, and 30% more. A majority of landowners, 62% this time, thought the deer populations were about right. And landowners, they ranked those 4 important things pretty close to the same, with the one difference being the number of deer vehicle collisions. And again, 11% reported ag damage, 35% reported forest damage, and 22% reported residential land damage. And it's one piece on the residential land damage is somewhat to be expected. This is a little bit more of a populated area and closer to the metro. So getting to some of those, more residential use. So without, further ado, these are the draft goals for both blocks. Block 4 is on the left and Block 5 is on the right. And the green areas are increase, red areas are decrease, and the yellows are stay the same. I tried to follow the stoplight So I apologize if anybody's red, green, and colorblind and not able to see that, but I'll speak a little bit about the differences in each block. So block 4, which we kind of talked about with the predator base in some, I guess, reproductive potential, maybe problems or just a little bit slower reproduction growth. Those northern forested DPAs have an increase in desired population, with the exception of 604 due to CWD. Those middle areas are stay the same, and those red areas on the transition line are a decrease. And switching over to block 5, the majority of these are decrease. In one major theme coming out of block 5, as I mentioned, that's the white area in the middle is DPA 701, which is the metro area. So a lot of these DPAs are in or bordering the metropolitan 7-county area. So there's some areas with smaller tracts of land that create deer refugia, somewhat protecting deer or having little or no hunting pressure. So it can be tough to impact deer populations in those areas. And the deer population in general is doing pretty well. In DPA 605, again, with CWD, we have disease concerns, and that's impacting the decision to decrease the population. In the other areas, with the exception of 235, it's hard to see. Carlos Avery is the only increased area. Otherwise, the others are stay the same. And some of this is, habitat conditions, those limiting factors and stuff like that. So with that said, in those draft goals, we would like to see what you think. Those draft goals are draft goals. They're not final. They can change. We want your input. We want you to provide feedback on the desired population trends. We have the information online to read those hunters and landowners input surveys. You can contact and ask questions to your local wildlife managers and gain information. So in block 4, the DPAs and the corresponding area manager are there to the right if you need to jot them down. Otherwise, this is being recorded. And then in block 5, those are your area managers with the corresponding DPAs. So and with that, other areas or other opportunities to provide input, you can fill out the online questionnaire, and that is at this website, or you can Google the Mindy and our website, Deer Goal Setting, and that'll bring you to it. And we also take email or written comments, which can be found, more information can be found at the website. And now we can open up to questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Todd, for providing that overview of the entire process and those draft goals. For those joining us tonight, if you have a question that you'd like to put into the chat, please do so now. We have a few that are coming in, and after we touch on those, we will move to any individuals who want to raise their hand and ask their questions that way. We had a couple of people wishing to clarify aspects of the hunter and landowner survey, Todd. One of the questions wanted to know what decrease and increase referred to there. And so I just want to clarify this, and you can confirm this, Todd, that it was with regards to the desired deer population in those DPAs. That's correct, right, Todd?
Yes, that's correct. And sorry if I didn't hit on that fully. and those were open-ended for them to fill in what the desired increase or decrease was within the population.
Okay, and another Hunter and Landover survey question was when were those surveys completed? Todd, do you know that offhand?
Yep. I don't know the exact date of when they were completed, but they went on last year, and the analysis happened over summer, and were completed. I guess the analysis was completed the end of summer was when we had all the results.
Okay. Another question that came in here was, what should the recommended harvest per square mile or harvest per DPA be as a percentage of deer density? Todd or Barb?
Barb, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can jump in. So hi everyone, Barb Keller, Big Game Program Leader. So we don't have a specific targeted harvest per square mile or just total harvest per DPA that we're necessarily targeting. In those areas where we want to decrease deer populations, we are looking to increase the antlerless take. So we want the antlerless harvest to increase. That's the best way to bring deer populations down. Conversely, if we're looking to increase the deer population, as has been proposed in some of these northern permit areas, we would want to reduce the antlerless harvest. So if, depending upon what DPA you're interested in or you hunt in, if the goal is to increase the deer population, you may see bag limits decrease in the future in order to move it towards that goal. Or conversely, if the goal is to decrease the deer population, you may see more opportunities, you may see bag limits increase. So, and I will say, as just kind of a rule of thumb, generally, if we want to keep a deer population from growing or bring a deer population down, we generally say we want to take about 25% of the adult doe population in an area. But that can be hard to estimate for some of our deer permit areas what that would be if we were looking to decrease the deer population. So I think hopefully I answered that, but if anyone else wanted to jump in, feel free to do so.
Anybody else from the DNR panel want to jump in? Or are we good on that? Okay, another question from the chat. It seems that on your harvest info for area 605, the harvest was at or below the state average. In an area that allows 5 deer with the tags costing $2.50, wouldn't you come to the conclusion that the population might be getting low? Would somebody like to speak to why those regulations are in place for 605?
Yeah, this is Todd. I can take that one, and then either Bob or Janine can jump into, or Barb, if you want to fill in any gaps. So I guess in general, DPA 605 is a CWD management zone, so we have disease concerns. So right off the bat, I guess that creates an area of concern for limiting population growth in general. And with those, I guess the harvest trends, so it's been a 605 has been a DPA for 3 years. Harvest has been relatively stable with a potential slight decline. So I mean, a stated goal with those harvest designations are to decrease the population within that area due to disease concerns. We are slightly meeting that objective currently. You know, these goals are for, although they're for a 10-year period, there's a 5-year check-in to see how we are doing. So they are, you know, the stuff is not completely set in stone, and you know, on an annual basis can be modified depending on how we feel the population is doing. Especially, it adds a little bit of a concern, and then also a little more difficulty in those CWD management areas. It's a little more delicate, but in general, the reason for that decrease 25 is due to CWD and disease concerns.
Do area managers want to add anything to that, or are we good on that?
This is Bob Fashionbauer, out of the Vermilion River office. Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to also reiterate that the, you know, the forb layer, the wildflowers, and the reforestation of the oak seedlings and such is getting pounded, especially at least on the public lands and public wildlife management areas within 605. So not only, you know, with the disease, but just the overall condition of the habitat and what the deer are doing to it is another reason.
Great, thanks, Bob.
Yeah, this is Janine Forland. 605 really varies a lot, you know, from very close to the metro area to, you know, agricultural land. And in regard to the question about the deer harvest per square mile, at least in the southern part of 605, that's a little, you have to understand that it's related to land access in combination with habitat. And so there's a lot of area that's intensively farmed for row crops. That's really not, you know, good deer habitat. That does affect the harvest per square mile, plus just how people can get on land. And I've looked at those numbers, harvest per square mile, how they compare to other permit areas that are immediately adjacent with similar habitat types, and it's not too far off, even with a much longer number of hunting days available, as well as the you know, the disease permit, so the extra antlerless harvest. But you know, it probably harvest can certainly affect those lower densities of deer that you'll find in the southern part of that permit area, no doubt about it.
Thank you, Janine. Okay, next question that we have from the chat here. Other than injuries from car deer collisions, what are the other public health concerns? Todd, do you want to clarify that? You mentioned it, but you didn't describe in detail what some of those are.
Yeah, I can elaborate a little more on that. Well, I guess in general, we've discussed a few disease concerns related to CWD, and some other ones, I guess, of concern. There's some research that indicates there's a higher incident of Lyme disease with higher deer densities. So those are a few more public health concerns.
Okay. Next question on the chat here, unless if anybody wants to add anything more to that. How do our license fees plug into the habitat management part of the equation? Leslie, are you here? Would you like to speak to that?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. Yeah, I can speak to it, but some of our area managers are probably better positioned. We do have a good chunk of our license fee, our deer license fees that go directly, the funds go directly to deer management, and a large amount of that, I could get the numbers and report them out later, but a large percentage of that is actually supporting field management, active habitat management around the state. So I hope that answers the question in general. But a few years back, we had a change in the way that license fees from deer license dollars are allocated to DNR funding and tracking how those license dollars are used. And you can probably look in our Game and Fish Fund report. That's on our website and should detail and provide a little bit more information on how much of those dollars from deer licenses go directly to deer management specifically, and then some itemized examples of habitat activities.
Thank you, Leslie. Any area managers who want to discuss that further? Okay. Another question from the chat, and then we'll go to any hands that are raised here. How is deer density measured?
Yeah, this is Barb. I can address that one. So we use, I think, as Todd mentioned, a population model to estimate deer populations. And we do that at the scale of a grouping of deer permit areas. Generally, the smaller scale you get to on a map, the more difficult it will be for a model to estimate the population. The population model we use is a harvest-based model. And so it needs data. It needs the areas that have higher deer harvests perform better in the model because that is the data that's feeding the model. So we group permit areas together in order to estimate the deer or run the model because it needs areas with higher harvest. So again, it's a harvest-based model. It looks at the number of deer that are harvested in 1 year, and then assuming survival and reproduction rates, which we have measured in the state via research projects. It then kind of back calculates the number of deer that had to be present during the hunting season, given known survival and mortality to achieve the harvest that occurred. It's a pretty, I would say, typical model that other state wildlife agencies use, probably the most common type of model that you'll find, especially in the Midwest for estimating big game populations. So that population model, we run it every year, and it produces an estimate that is then kind of broken down back into the deer permit area scale. And then to estimate density, we simply divide that by the square mileage of a permit area. So hopefully that helped address that question. Others feel free to jump in if I missed anything.
Great, thank you, Barb. We have a couple of DPA specific questions that I want to get to now, because I think they're good at highlighting some of the issues at play in these goal related questions and the relationships to regulations. So the first is in Deer Permit Area 605, if the goal is to decrease overall population growth and deer are overutilizing the available resources, will more permits to access the Vermilion River WMA for hunting be issued? Bob or Janine, would you like to take that one on?
I can address the Vermilion River and Vermilion Highlands. I think the person may be referring to the Vermilion Highlands, which we have a lottery on, where we allow archery, firearm, and muzzleload hunting going on. There, that is just one WMA within 605. The Vermilion River portion of that is open to the public. Anyone that wants to hunt it can hunt it. We wouldn't change. We're only taking a handful of deer. There aren't that many deer in the Vermilion Highlands itself. So increasing the number of permits there really wouldn't do any justice to reducing the deer population. The reason we limit the number of hunters there is to make it a quality hunt. So you're not stepping on top of each other like you are across the dirt road on the Vermilion River. So I hope that addresses that question.
Thank you, Bob. Janine, do you have anything to add, or are you good with that answer?
Yeah, Bob was in a better position to answer those questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. The other DPA specific question here, does increasing the harvest by 25% put an area into intensive harvest? So does increasing the harvest, or, so actually I think for this, they were curious about DPA 229, where there was a recommendation to decrease the deer population by 25%. So will that decrease of 25% put the area into intensive harvest in 229 specifically? Fred, I'm not sure, would you like to take this one on, or?
Sure.
Great.
Yeah, this is Fred Bankson, Area Wildlife Manager out of Sauk Rapids. Permit area 229 is in my work area. Question is, I read it a couple times, and I think the individual is certainly asking if we increase the harvest by 25%, will the permit area remain in intensive harvest? Well, you know, our goals have been, 229 is an area that has a very significant deer population, and we've been trying to lower the deer population certainly the last 3 or 4 years. And if we're able to increase the harvest by 25% over current rates, then, you know, we certainly would be in that area of more of a management I guess choice in the harvest strategy, which, you know, we would like to get the harvest strategy to either hunter choice or managed. That would be a goal of mine anyway. And right now it's a 3 deer limit plus early antlerless. Well, that's a good indicator that we have a very high deer population. So I guess you'd say if we could increase the harvest by 25% from where it's been the past couple of years, I think we would probably start achieving our objective of getting the deer herd down to where we would like to see it, either at hunter choice or at a managed strategy.
Thank you, Fred. Appreciate it. So Jonathan, I'm going to unmute you here. You've had your hand raised for a while. Would you like to ask a question? You are unmuted.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, it was the automated person came on and let me know that the meeting was being recorded, so you didn't hear me when I first talked. But I live in 285 and I'm down in sort of the southwest quadrant, I guess you could say, if you broke it up. And I've been out here now for a couple of years, and I'm not gonna give everybody my sob story in a nutshell, though. I'm just really shocked on how low the deer population numbers are. And I was a little surprised when I first moved in that it was a 2 deer limit, and I was even more surprised after the amount of deer that I've seen. And so that made me wonder, and this sort of relates to some of the other comments I've heard tonight, you know, about the 605 region and a couple of the others, is, you know, some of these deer zones are so big, and especially when you're getting close to the metro area, the ones that are adjacent to the metro area, that you know, some of it is part metro, some of it's part not, is there do you guys break these deer zones up at all, or is it all or nothing when you're just determining these numbers? Because I feel like 285, just using my zone as an example, it's a pretty big area, and I think if you looked at the numbers of where a lot of those deer are harvested, like if you broke it down, it'd probably be more up into the northeast or northwest quadrant, up in the lakes area and around the Crow River Valley, things like that. But I would guess that that's sort of indicative of a lot of zones. Some of them aren't quite this uniform layout of the landscape and the land use. So I was wondering if they're broken down at all, or if there's ever discussion of breaking these zones up even more.
Thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate that question. Barb or Leslie, would you like to speak to Jonathan's question?
Yes, so this is Barb. So our deer permit area boundaries are something that we do discuss periodically if changes need to be made. Obviously the boundaries are set up so that they are encompassing, areas of similar deer population densities, other landscape sorts of factors. But over time, these things change. And so over time, when a particular boundary maybe made sense and seemed to work over time, sometimes that can change as deer populations change, as the landscape changes through development and other factors. That being said, there are problems that come along with changing boundaries, especially the frequent changing of boundaries. One is that it's confusing to our hunters if we're changing boundaries back and forth. Obviously, these boundaries have certain regulations that go along with them. You're able to harvest more deer within a certain deer permit area than outside of it. And if hunters miss that their boundary changed and they're now in a different deer permit area, that's confusing to them and can lead to some enforcement problems if they're not aware of that. There's also problems with monitoring the deer population over time when we change the boundaries. That deer population model that I mentioned, if you change the boundary of a DPA, it doesn't have that harvest data that drives it. And so we actually have to go 5 years in order to build up the harvest data to run the population model, which gives us an assessment, or it's one of the tools we use to assess whether the deer population is at goal or not. So those are some of the problems with changing boundaries, but and we hope not to do frequent changing of boundaries. We have kind of set a time schedule of every 5 years. We will discuss if any boundary changes need to be made, and I believe it was 2019 when it was 2019 or 2020 when we last changed a number of different permit area boundaries throughout the state. So it'll be a few years before we'll be considering boundary changes again, but it is one of those things that we do consider from time to time. We like to limit the amount of time that we're making those, or limit the number of times we're making boundary changes due to those issues when we change them. But it is something that we consider, and that sort of feedback is helpful to tell the area managers about, so that they can be aware of issues that are happening within the permit area and potentially may request boundary changes in the future.
Yeah, hi, this is Stein Inver, the area wildlife supervisor for 284 and 285. I just wanted to chime in on what you're probably seeing in Southwest 285 is conditions more like permit area 284 in habitat. And if you look at 284, it comprises mostly Sibley County. It's farmland. It's doesn't have the diversity of habitats that 285 does, and consequently we have an entirely separate management strategy for 284, and that line has to be drawn somewhere. And I think what you're seeing is that the shifting of habitat conditions over time might be causing that line to migrate a little further north. It's hard to say exactly, but I too have considered, just like Barb just said, redrawing some of my permit area lines, and that line between 284 and 285 is certainly one that we've talked about in our office. So I understand where you're coming from on that, and you know, we're doing what we can to address that as we monitor this. But I think it is changing. You're right.
Okay, thank you. We have come to the end of our time here. It's just about 7:30. For those who, there's a couple other chat questions. You can email them to us, or we, actually, if you stick around, we'll have somebody answer in the chat to your questions. But to close this evening's conversation, or this evening's webinar, thank you very much for being here, but I want to hand it off once again to Gretchen to close out the evening. Gretchen.
Absolutely, Adam. Do you mind putting up that screen that shows the website location for people
will
to
do
fill out the
that.
questionnaire? Or was that Todd that had that?
That's me.
I just wanted to say thank you to all the staff also who invested time to be a resource for us here this evening. Excellent questions that were posed, excellent feedback. Please continue to the participants, please continue to be involved and pass your enthusiasm along to others. Encourage your network of friends or your community to participate and let them know that we are taking comments. If you can, just take a snapshot of that website location right there, fill out the questionnaire. You can also sign up for deer updates through our website, which can also provide emails. Otherwise, definitely thank you so much for taking the time out of everybody's busy schedules to be with us here tonight. Much appreciated. That's all I got, Adam. Thank you. Thanks again, DNR team.
Okay. Yeah, please go ahead and go to that link, and you can find the online questionnaire there, another opportunity to provide feedback and find out more about the different ways of providing all sorts of feedback on these draft goals. So thank you, Gretchen. Thank you all for being here, and have a good rest of your evening.